You know that voice in your head that tells you you're not enough, the one that shows up right when you're about to take a risk, right when you're about to speak your truth, right when you're about to claim something you actually want. Listen closely to it for a moment. Whose voice is it, really? If you're honest with yourself, and I mean truly honest, there's a good chance it sounds an awful lot like your father. Not the actual man who may or may not still be in your life, but the father who lives inside you, the one who has been shaping your sense of what you're capable of since before you had words for capability. And here's what most people never realize. You might not be weak at all. You might just be carrying someone else's fear and calling it your own. This is the father complex in action, and it's one of the most pervasive yet invisible forces shaping your inner life. It's why you second-guess yourself in moments that matter. It's why you feel small in your own skin, even when you're objectively competent. It's why you either rebel against every form of authority or collapse under it, and sometimes both, depending on the day. The father you carry in your psyche isn't the same as the father who raised you, though they're connected in ways that are both obvious and hidden. And until you see this clearly, you'll keep mistaking learned behavior for destiny, inherited limitation for personal truth. Before the end of this video, we're going to explore how the father complex shapes your relationship with your own power, and what becomes possible when you finally distinguish between the father's voice and your own. We'll look at what Jung actually meant by complex, why weakness might be the wrong word entirely, and how the psyche uses your father as a screen onto which it projects something much older and more archetypal than one man's failures or successes. Welcome to Deep Psyche Lab, where we explore the depths of human psychology through a Jungian lens. If you're new here, this is a channel for people who want to understand themselves at the deepest level, not through self-help platitudes, but through the rigorous, often challenging work of depth psychology. If this kind of exploration speaks to you, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. And if you've been on this journey with us for a while, thank you for continuing to go deep. The father complex doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up in your life with a clear label. Instead, it operates in the background like an invisible inheritance, shaping how you move through the world, how much space you allow yourself to take up, what risks feel permissible, and which dreams feel impossibly out of reach. It's there in the way you hear criticism, even when none was intended. It's there in the way you prove yourself over and over, but never quite feel prove. It's there in the standards you can never meet, the bar that keeps rising no matter how high you jump. Jung used the word complex in a very specific way, and it's worth understanding because it explains so much of what you might be experiencing. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of ideas, images, and experiences that are split off from conscious awareness and operates with a kind of autonomous power. Think of it like a subpersonality within you, something with its own agenda, its own voice, its own way of hijacking your responses in specific situations. The father complex is one such cluster, a psychic structure built around your early experiences with your father or father figures, but also connected to something much older, the archetypal image of the father that exists in the collective unconscious of humanity. This is crucial to understand. The father who affects you isn't just the man who raised you or didn't raise you. It's also the father as an archetypal force, the principle of authority, structure, law, tradition, the word that comes down from above and says, this is how things are. Every culture has myths about fathers who devour their children, fathers who withhold their blessing, fathers who send their sons on impossible quests. These aren't just stories. They're maps of psychological realities that repeat across generations, across continents, across centuries. Your personal father activated this archetype in you, gave it a specific flavor, a particular tone of voice, a set of gestures and judgments. But the weight you feel, that's older than him. That's the father speaking through him and now through you. Most people carry a father complex without ever naming it as such. They just know they feel weak in certain situations. They know they struggle with authority figures, or conversely, that they need authority figures to tell them they're doing okay. They know there's a voice of judgment that's harsher than anyone else's feedback, a voice that can reduce them to feeling small even in their moments of achievement. What they don't realize is that this isn't weakness. This is a complex in action, a part of the psyche that's been colonized by someone else's limitations, someone else's fears, someone else's unlived life. Let me say that again because it's essential. What you experience as personal weakness may actually be your father's unlived life living through you. Jung observed this phenomenon repeatedly in his clinical practice. He noticed that children often carry the psychological burdens their parents couldn't bear to face in themselves. The father who never pursued his creative dreams might produce a child who sabotages every creative opportunity that comes their way. The father who lived in fear of taking risks might produce a child who feels paralyzed at every threshold. The father who never learned to trust his own authority might produce a child who constantly seeks validation from others, who cannot make a decision without checking with someone they perceive as more powerful, more knowing, more legitimate. This is not mysticism, this is psychology. Children absorb the emotional atmosphere of the household like a sponge absorbs water. You learned your father's relationship to power before you learned to tie your shoes. You internalized his stance toward risk, toward failure, toward visibility, toward success. And if his stance was one of defeat, of resignation, of bitter compromise, of quiet desperation, then that became the baseline of what's possible, what's safe, what's real. You didn't choose this. It happened below the level of consciousness, in the realm where attachment and survival are the only imperatives. But here's where it gets even more complex. Sometimes the father complex doesn't show up as obvious limitation. Sometimes it shows up as compensation. Maybe your father was weak, genuinely weak, unable to stand up for himself or for you. And so you became hypervigilant about strength. You built yourself into someone who would never show vulnerability, never ask for help. Never let anyone see you struggling. You armored yourself against his weakness by becoming its opposite. But that's still a complex. That's still being organized around him, still letting his failure define your form. You're not free, you're just in reactive opposition, which is another kind of cage. The Greek myths understood this pattern deeply. Think of the story of Icarus and Daedalus. Daedalus, the master craftsman, builds wings so he and his son can escape imprisonment. But he warns Icarus, don't fly too low or the sea will dampen the wings, don't fly too high or the sun will melt the wax. The father sets the boundaries. The father defines what's permissible. And Icarus, in his desire to transcend those boundaries, flies too high and falls to his death. On one level, this is a story about a son's hubris. But on another, deeper level, it's about what happens when you internalize a father's fear of both the depths and the heights, when you carry his limits as your own, and then rebel against them without actually transcending them. Icarus didn't find his own way. He defined himself against his father's warning, which is just another way of being bound by it. Or consider the myth of Kronos, Saturn in the Roman tradition, who devours his children to prevent them from overthrowing him. This is the father complex at its most literal and most symbolic. The father who cannot tolerate the child's independent power. The father who must consume the child's potential to secure his own position. Now, your actual father probably didn't try to eat you, but psychologically, many fathers do devour their children's possibilities. They do it through mockery, through dismissal, through comparisons, through projecting their own failures onto their children and then punishing those children for carrying what was placed on them. And the child grows up feeling weak not because they are weak, but because their strength was never allowed to emerge. It was consumed before it could take form. You might be wondering how this applies when your father wasn't obviously cruel or domineering. What about the absent father, the checked-out father, the father who was physically present but emotionally unavailable? This creates its own complex, and in some ways it's more confusing because there's nothing obvious to point to. There was no dramatic wound, no clear moment of betrayal. There was just absence, just silence, just a man in the next room who might as well have been on another planet. And from that silence, you learned that your needs were too much, that your presence was a burden, that the appropriate response to life's difficulties was withdrawal. You learned that strength means not needing anyone, that vulnerability is weakness, that the only safe relationship is no relationship at all. That's the absent father's complex. It teaches you that connection itself is dangerous, that to reach out is to risk annihilation by indifference. The father complex operates through a mechanism Jung called identification and projection. When you identify with your father, when you take on his traits, his worldview, his limitations as if they were your own. You lose access to who you might be apart from him. Your sense of self becomes merged with his image. You can't tell where he ends and you begin. And when you project onto him, when you make him larger than life, either as the ideal you can never reach or the failure you're determined not to repeat, you're still organizing your entire psyche around him. You're still making him the center, the axis, the reference point for everything you do and everything you refuse to do. True differentiation, which is what Jung called individuation, requires something more subtle than either identification or rejection. It requires seeing your father clearly, without the distortions of idealization or demonization. It requires recognizing that he was a human being shaped by his own wounds, his own father complex, his own unlived life. It requires separating what belongs to him from what belongs to you. And that separation is terrifying because it means standing alone in a way you never have before. It means discovering who you are when the father's voice, both his actual voice and the archetypal father's voice, goes silent. In many traditional cultures, there were initiation rites specifically designed to separate the son from the mother and the father, to create a psychological death of the child so the adult could be born. The boy would be taken from the village, would undergo trials, would face symbolic death and rebirth, and would return as a man, not his father's son, but his own person. We don't have these rights anymore. We don't have clear thresholds between childhood and adulthood. And so the father complex often stays intact well into middle age, still running the show, still determining what's possible, still whispering, "You're not strong enough, you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes." But let me be clear about something. Recognizing a father complex isn't about blaming your father. This is not therapy, and this is not an invitation to rehearse your grievances. Your father was also someone's son. He also carried a complex. He also inherited limitations he never chose. The point is not to add another layer of victimhood to your identity. The point is to see the mechanism clearly enough that you can stop confusing it with reality. The point is to realize that the weakness you feel may not be a fact about you. It may be a fact about the lens through which you were taught to see yourself. If this perspective is resonating with you so far, I'd appreciate if you'd take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this content, and it lets me know that this kind of depth is valuable to you. Thank you. Now let's go deeper into how this complex actually manifests in daily life, because the theory is useless unless you can recognize it in yourself. The father complex often shows up most powerfully in your relationship with authority. Pay attention to how you respond when someone with power over you, a boss, a teacher, a mentor, a police officer, gives you feedback or makes a demand. Do you immediately feel small? Do you feel rage? Do you feel the need to prove yourself? Do you feel an almost physical sensation of being reduced, of becoming a child again? That's the complex. That's not the present moment. That's a part of you that's still trying to win the father's approval or rebel against the father's authority. The person in front of you might be completely neutral, even supportive, but the complex doesn't care about reality. It only knows its own pattern. The father complex also shows up in your relationship with your own authority, your own power. Do you trust your own judgment? Can you make a decision and stand by it, even when others disagree? Or do you constantly second-guess yourself? Constantly seek confirmation from people you perceive as more legitimate? Jung wrote in The Development of Personality about the crucial importance of trusting one's own inner authority, one's own sense of what is right and true. But if you have a strong father complex, that inner authority is contaminated. It's not really yours. It's a version of your father's voice, or worse, the voice of the father archetype telling you that your own knowing can't be trusted, that you need permission from someone above you, someone external, someone who knows better. Here's a specific example. A man in his 40s, let's call him Michael, came to understand his father complex when he realized he couldn't finish any creative project he started. He would begin with enthusiasm, would work intensely for a while, and then would sabotage himself right before completion. He'd lose interest, he'd find flaws, he'd decide it wasn't good enough. In exploring this pattern, he remembered that his father had been a failed musician who gave up his dreams to take a stable job he hated. His father never directly discouraged Michael's creativity, But the atmosphere of the house was thick with resigned bitterness. The unspoken message was, creative dreams are for fools, the world will crush you if you try. Michael absorbed this. And now, 30 years later, he was still living his father's resignation, still making his father's choice, even though his father had never explicitly asked him to. The work for Michael wasn't to confront his father or to process his anger, though there was anger, and it needed space. The work was to see that the voice stopping him at the threshold of completion wasn't his voice. It was an internalized father who feared his own success, who equated visibility with danger, who learned that the safe thing to do was quit before you get too close to what you actually want. Once Michael could see this clearly, once he could distinguish between his father's fear and his own possibility, the pattern began to loosen. It didn't disappear overnight. Complexes rarely do, but he could catch himself now. He could notice when the old voice started up and say, "That's not me, that's history, that's an inheritance I didn't choose." And slowly, gradually, he began to finish what he started. Or consider another example. A woman, let's call her Sarah, struggled with a different manifestation of the father complex. Her father had been successful, admired, charismatic, but he was also critical, impossible to please, always moving the goalposts. Sarah spent her entire life trying to earn his respect, achieving at the highest levels in her field, accumulating accolades and recognition. But nothing was ever enough. She could never rest. She could never feel satisfied. Because the real hunger wasn't for external achievement. It was for the father's love, and that love had been conditional, always just out of reach, contingent on being more, doing more, proving more. Sarah's complex manifested not as weakness, but as driven exhaustion. She was powerful in the external world, but powerless in relation to the inner father, who judged everything she did as insufficient. The breakthrough for her came when she realized she was trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. Her actual father had his own wounds, his own father complex that made him incapable of giving unconditional acceptance. And the archetypal father, the principle of achievement, hierarchy, merit, is designed to keep raising the bar. That's its function. It's supposed to push you toward excellence, toward discipline, toward mastery. But when you're possessed by it, when you've never differentiated from it, it becomes a tyrant. It becomes the voice that says you're only as good as your last accomplishment, that rest is weakness, that being human is a failure. The fairy tale, The Handless Maiden, offers another window into this pattern. In the tale, a father makes a deal with the devil without realizing it, and the devil demands the father's daughter as payment. The father, in his weakness or his collusion, agrees. The daughter cuts off her own hands to make herself unacceptable to the devil. On a psychological level, this is about what happens when the father betrays the child's trust, when he sacrifices the child's well-being for his own comfort or survival. The daughter's response, cutting off her hands, her ability to grasp and hold and create, is a symbol of self-mutilation in response to the father's wound. She makes herself incapable rather than risk trusting her own capacity again. How many people do you know who have cut off their own hands? Not literally, of course, but psychologically. They've made themselves incapable of reaching for what they want. They've disabled their own power because somewhere early on, the father's betrayal, whether through absence, through criticism, through emotional violence, through sheer neglect, taught them that to be capable, to be visible, to reach for something, was to risk catastrophic loss. Better to be weak, better to be unable. Better to remove the possibility of trying and failing than to face what trying and failing might mean about your worth. The father complex is particularly insidious because it often masquerades as self-knowledge. You tell yourself, I'm just being realistic. I know my limitations. I'm not delusional. But what if those limitations aren't yours? What if the realistic assessment you're making is actually your father's self-assessment, projected onto you and internalized so thoroughly you can't see where it came from? Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections about the importance of questioning every supposedly fixed truth about yourself. He understood that much of what we call character or personality is actually complex, patterns formed in response to early relationships, patterns that calcified into identity but don't represent our actual potential. There's a particular cruelty in the father complex that's worth naming. It's the cruelty of potential that was seen but then crushed. Many people with father wounds report that their fathers did see their gifts, their uniqueness, their spark. But instead of nurturing it, the father felt threatened by it, or envious of it, or simply didn't know what to do with it. And so the father either ignored it, mocked it, or actively suppressed it. The child learns that being seen is dangerous. The child learns that showing what you're capable of invites attack. And so the child becomes careful, becomes small, becomes strategic about revealing anything real. That's not weakness. That's a brilliant adaptive strategy in an environment where strength was punished. But it's a strategy you're probably still running long after the environment changed. The psychological concept that's relevant here is what Jung called the critical superego, the internalized parent who lives in your psyche and continues to punish, judge, and restrict you long after the actual parent is gone or has changed. This critical superego is often primarily structured around the father's voice, the father's standards, the father's disappointments. It's the voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" when you dare to want something beyond what he had. It's the voice that says, "You'll fail just like I did," when you take a risk he was too afraid to take. It's the voice that says, "You're weak," when what it really means is, "You remind me of my own weakness, and I can't tolerate seeing it." Differentiation begins with hearing this voice as a voice, not as truth, not as reality, but as one perspective among many, a perspective that came from somewhere and doesn't have to define where you're going. This is active imagination work, one of Jung's core practices. You create a dialogue with the inner father. You let him speak. You listen to what he says. You feel where his words land in your body, and then you speak back. Not from the place of the wounded child trying to win his love, but from the place of the adult you're becoming who can look at him directly and say, "I hear you. I understand why you believe that, but I'm not living your life. I'm living mine." This isn't rejection, this is differentiation. Rejection would be cutting off all contact, internal or external, and pretending the father doesn't matter, that he didn't shape you, that you're entirely self-made. That's just another complex in disguise, the complex of false independence. True differentiation means you can carry what was valuable from the father while releasing what was toxic. It means you can acknowledge his influence while refusing to be determined by it. It means you can feel compassion for his struggles while insisting on your own freedom. There's a moment in many people's psychological development when they realize their father was just a man. Not a god, not a monster, just a man flawed, limited, doing the best he could with what he had, which often wasn't very much. This moment is simultaneously devastating and liberating. Devastating because it means you can't keep waiting for him to change, can't keep hoping that one day he'll finally see you, finally approve, finally give you what you needed. Liberating because once you stop waiting for him, you can begin to give it to yourself. You can become the good father to your own inner child. You can offer yourself the encouragement, the blessing, the permission to be powerful that you never received from him. Jung wrote about the wise old man archetype, the internal figure of guidance and wisdom that emerges as the psyche matures. This wise old man is different from the personal father and different from the critical superego. He's not punishing, he's not absent. He's present, grounded, capable of holding complexity. He knows that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites. He knows that power comes not from denying your limits, but from knowing them clearly and choosing your direction anyway. Accessing this archetype is part of healing the father complex. It's learning to parent yourself from a place of actual wisdom rather than internalized criticism. What would it mean to stop calling yourself weak? Not to gaslight yourself into thinking you have no limitations, but to question whether the word weak is even accurate. What if what you've been calling weakness is actually a different kind of strength? The strength to feel deeply, to question, to refuse to participate in systems that require you to betray yourself. What if what you've been calling weakness is actually sensitivity, perceptiveness, a refusal to armor yourself against the world? What if the problem isn't that you're weak, but that you've been measuring yourself against a definition of strength that your father couldn't meet and passed down to you as a burden? The invitation here is radical self-honesty. Take an inventory of the places in your life where you feel weak, inadequate, less than. Write them down if you need to. And then ask, whose voice am I hearing when I name this as weakness? Is this my assessment or is it my father's? Is this based on who I actually am or who I was told I should be? Is this a fact or a story I inherited? Most people discover that at least half of their supposed weaknesses are actually someone else's projections, someone else's fears, someone else's unlived life masquerading as self-knowledge. There's a practice in Jungian work called reclaiming projections. It means taking back the psychic energy you've invested in seeing your father as all-powerful, either powerful in his authority or powerful in his damage. When you're organized around him, when your entire sense of self is a reaction to him, you've given him all the power. You've made him the sun and yourself the planet that orbits. Reclaiming that projection means recognizing that he was never as large as you made him in your psyche. He was a man. He had his own demons. He was doing what he knew how to do, which might have been very little. And while that shaped you, it doesn't have to continue shaping you once you see it clearly. The transformation that becomes possible is this. You begin to access a strength that isn't reactive, isn't compensatory, isn't about proving anything. It's just presence. It's the ability to be with yourself exactly as you are without the Father's voice commenting, judging, measuring. It's the ability to take up space without apology. It's the ability to make decisions from your own authority rather than constantly checking with the internalized Father to see if you're doing it right. It's the ability to fail without it meaning anything about your core worth. It's the ability to succeed without waiting for permission or praise. The work with the Father complex is never about erasing the Father from your psyche. That's impossible, and it wouldn't be useful if it were possible. He's woven into the fabric of who you are. The work is about bringing consciousness to the patterns, about seeing where you're still living as if you're in his house, under his rule, subject to his judgment. The work is about growing up internally, which is different from growing older. Plenty of people reach 50, 60, 70, and are still psychologically children in relation to the Father, still seeking approval, still rebelling, still wounded by his absence or his presence, still weak because they never questioned what strength could mean outside his framework. This channel explores psychology for self-understanding and is not a substitute for professional therapy. If the patterns we've discussed today feel overwhelming, or if you're working with deep trauma, please reach out to a qualified therapist who can support you in that work. What I want you to take from this exploration is simple but profound. You are not who your father said you were. You are not what his limitations taught you to be. You are not weak because he was weak, or because he called you weak, or because he needed you to be weak so he could feel strong. You're in the process of discovering what your actual capacities are, which means first seeing clearly what you've been carrying that doesn't belong to you. The Father complex is heavy, but it's not permanent. It loosens in the light of awareness. And on the other side of it is a self you haven't met yet, the self that exists independent of his approval or his disappointment, the self that can stand on its own ground. Your strength isn't found in becoming his opposite or in proving him wrong. Your strength is found in seeing him clearly, neither as a hero nor as a villain, but as a man whose presence and absence shaped you and who you're now learning to outgrow. Not by cutting him out, but by growing past the limits he tried to place on you, consciously or unconsciously. This is the work of individuation. This is how you become yourself. Thank you for going this deep with me today. If you found value in this exploration, please like this video and subscribe to Deep Psyche Lab for more content on Jungian psychology and depth exploration. Hit the notification bell so you know when new videos drop. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Complete this sentence. I thought I was weak, but actually I was. Share what you're discovering as you question the Father complex in your own life. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. The Father's voice doesn't have to be the loudest one in your head anymore. You can learn to hear yourself beneath it, and that changes everything.